Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's Tech Insider. My name is Brianna Martin from Global Field Readiness, and I'll be your host. I have a couple of things to go over before we get started. Please note that all callers are on mute. Please use the Q&A window for any questions to ensure that everyone can see them. And please note this session is being recorded and will be available for playback along with the decks in Field Academy within 24 hours. And today's tech topic is vFabric Application Director and Cloud Service Provisioning, and we have a couple of speakers to introduce. First up will be Pete Cruz, then Amjad Afana, and Hartman Schobel. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Pete. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's session. Great to meet everyone. What we're gonna cover today, I'm just going to go through and pull up a quick agenda. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about just CSP and kind of application director and where it fits in our overall cloud service provisioning message, just to kind of set the framework. Then we'll spend a good amount of time going through a product demo where I'll kind of give you kind of the lay of the land from the product perspective. And then I will turn it over to Amjad to talk about the roadmap for the product suite and how Application Director is going to continue to evolve within the overall CSP suite, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. Okay. So as you all have probably seen or are aware, within the VMware vCloud suite, the cloud service provisioning is really focused at laying on top of the cloud infrastructure tools, VCD, vSphere, which is really responsible for setting up the network, the infrastructure, the systems, and the services. We've built a number of applications within the vCloud suite that are focused on both service provisioning, operations management, and then business management as part of the overall cloud management strategy. I'm going to focus some time kind of talking about the service provisioning aspect and where these tools and these applications are focused. So when we look at the service provisioning suite, it's really geared at really allowing organizations to accelerate the delivery of any of the services, both with greater control and compliance and governance associated with that, to really enable any type of service, whether it's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, desktop as a service, or at any data as a service, et cetera, down the road. Incorporating into this overall suite policies for governance and standardization and control, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those features within Application Director. When we start looking at the broader suite, we'll see how that manifests itself in policies within VCAC, for example, and then we'll talk about standardization and what Application Director allows you to do, and really kind of support that lifecycle management and to be able to support a broad range of vendor support, both from an OS perspective and ultimately from a cloud perspective, and of course being extensible by design, being able to not only support existing environments, but be able to extend it to support customer environments and be able to mold it to how they do business, their processes, their policies, et cetera. So we look at the cloud service provisioning objectives for the different users and organizations, right? We look at the overall capabilities, right? Being able to integrate into existing environments, that standardization, control, and policy, kind of a self-service interface for IT and line of business to be able to offer up services to those users and allow them to be able to select what it is that they want based on your policies and profiles, and then let them do those deployments to alleviate the burden on the operations staff. So we look at automation, being able to automate that, the virtualization infrastructure operations admin, being able to deploy, roll those types of things out, whether it's infrastructure, server systems, VM. We also look at from a director of infrastructure and applications, cloud architects, line of business, the folks that are really interested in defining, infrastructure as a service or even platform as a service. And then ultimately, from the IT stakeholder perspective, the CIOs and VPs of IT, they're really looking at driving their entire organization to enable be able to offer any type of IT as a service to their user community. And that's really kind of some of the designing principles behind the platform as a whole, behind the whole cloud service provisioning suite. So ultimately, throughout the suite and serving these different stakeholders and across these different types of use cases, really trying to accelerate the provisioning of resources, allowing organizations to get these applications up or get these infrastructure and applications up for users to be able to use as fast as possible, provide kind of an on-demand access to service for users, being able to make IT more of a business partner with the user community versus that black box, and then allow the business as a whole to support the agility that they need to meet the market demands that they're facing, whether it's new applications, new services, depending on whether it's a managed service provider, a host, or a large enterprise that's trying to serve a large user community. So we focus in on that cloud service provisioning suite around platform as a service, and this is really where Application Director comes into play. Being able to ultimately automate the delivery of that platform as a service. So all of those things that have typically taken an inordinate amount of time and resources to deploy for an application, in servers, infrastructure, VMs, application deployment, configuration, et cetera, and really automate that process to enable them to be able to stand up these environments quickly, whether it's for quality assurance, whether it's for development environments, or even if it's production, and allow them to make changes to those deployments and also be able to leverage and deploy those applications on basically any type of cloud infrastructure in the long run. And really provide, as I mentioned before, that standardization on the components in the application so that you can be sure that every time an application or environment is deployed, it's deployed in a consistent fashion that maps to the needs and the requirements that you've set forth in your organization. So when I go through the demo, basically what I'm going to highlight are really some of these key aspects, right? Be able to streamline the deployment and update process of an application, leverage some pre-built components that are already built into the system. There are also areas where you can build in custom-built services. You can also leverage through the marketplace services that have been built by partners or by users or VMware folks that have made that available for customers to go in and download and leverage subject matter expertise. And then obviously to be able to open that up and deploy on any type of environment. Okay, so I think we're ready to start the demo. Once I get the give me one second. So we got a couple questions while I'm getting this environment up and running. One of the questions: how would I compare this to VCAC? From a separation of Application Director and VCAC, Application Director is really focused on deploying applications at the application stack, whereas VCAC is looking at right now infrastructure as a service, being able to deploy services, be able to allow organizations to reserve resources, physical, virtual, et cetera, and make those available for folks to turn on and stand up those systems. For example, say I want to have a I need to have a Linux machine or with a certain number of CPU and memory, et cetera. They can stand that up and they can work with it. If you want to then deploy, say, a web application or a packaged application, a SharePoint, an Exchange, an Oracle database, et cetera, you can leverage Application Director to deploy that application on top of that provisioned infrastructure. Okay, so we're really looking, that's where we look at VCACs from an infrastructure as a service perspective and all of the automation and policy and governance associated with that, and Application Director being able to overlay, that layer 7 type application environment on top of that and stand that platform up for users to then begin to use it. So Hartman, while I work on, you want to answer some of the other questions while I'm working on getting this page up?
I was just about to do that. So, Chris, so before we move on to Chris's question, so Mike, you asked specifically around deploying PaaS. If Pete's answer wasn't sufficient, feel free to drop some note back into the Q&A window, or we can pick it up a little at the end in the main Q&A session. So Chris asked about articulating App Director for provisioning the value prop when App Director doesn't do updates and only one deployment profile. So specifically, this is geared towards the vCloud Suite licensing. In terms of the vCloud Suite Enterprise Edition has only the provisioning capability of App Director, and the limitation on one deployment profile has been removed, as far as I know. Amjad, I don't know if that's something that you know offhand, but my understanding is from a packaging and pricing perspective, we have taken the only one deployment profile out of the provisioning licensing limitation.
Yeah, and that's my understanding as well.
Okay. So Chris, we'll confirm that, but as far as we know, the licensing now allows you to do the provisioning automation and tear down automation through multiple deployment profiles in VCD, and then for the non-vCloud Suite based capabilities, when we look at the full lifecycle automation management capabilities, obviously that does allow updates and anything and provisioning to AWS and going outside of that. Let's see. Can we elaborate a little bit more on the VCAC App Director integration? Amjad, you're going to cover that in the roadmap section, I believe.
I could definitely talk about it as far as like the future plans. But
okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll wait for Amjad to go through his piece on that. Let's see. So to Dan's question about App Director in their own environment, maybe we can take that offline. And so that was to Dan Rosano. Feel free to contact Pete or myself, and we'll get you some support on that. So Shirag, for your question, can App Director work with vSphere directly? Not in the current release. The 5.0.1 cannot. 5.0.1 works specifically with VCD and with AWS in the full automation lifecycle capabilities. We'll talk a little bit about what's coming in terms of integration with VCAC that will enable vSphere, working with vSphere, and how that might work. So that's kind of a quick run through of some of the questions. Pete, how are you doing on that in that environment?
I'm connecting to the environment right now. So.
Okay. Do we want to flip and have Amjad do the roadmap piece?
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay. Amjad, are you okay doing that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so apologies to everyone. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties with the demo pod. We are connecting to a different one, and Pete's just getting logged into that one. So while Pete's getting that squared away, Amjad, if we could turn it over to you, and then you can go through the roadmap section and also answer some of the questions that were popping up in the Q&A window.
Sure. So let's see. Where is my roadmap slides?
They're the next tab that says 2013. The last one.
Oh, got it. Sorry about that. Yeah,
no,
thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, so I'll cover the roadmap. There's a lot of slides here, and I tried to make it specific about the vFabric Application Director, but as Pete and Hartman were saying that there's going to be a lot of integration between VCAC and Application Director going forward. So a lot of the VCAC specific future items, I haven't focused on that in this presentation. So of course, forward-looking statement. So as far as the management mission within the MBU, so 2 years ago, we introduced the VMware mission to simplify and automate IT management. So that mission remains unchanged, but it's a bit broadened now. So new capabilities extend management across multiple platforms and providers, and we're delivering solutions for managing services across hybrid clouds, and all to better help you on your journey to the cloud and your transition to becoming a broker of IT services. So the differentiated approach translates into 3 key areas within the MBU. So the cloud service provisioning, which will have vFabric Application Director and vCloud Automation Center, and it basically focuses on automated policy-based provisioning of infrastructure, application, and desktop services. And then cloud operations management, of course, that's the VCOps piece, and focuses on automated operations of your infrastructure resources and applications. And there will be actually some kind of integration between VCOps and VCAC that will help you in terms of monitoring infrastructure and reclaiming inactive VMs. And then cloud business management is the ability to meter and manage the cost, quality, and value of cloud services, and that's the ITBM piece. So before drilling down into these pillars, we can take a look at the VMware Cloud Management in more detail. So the light blue is the cloud infrastructure platform of the vSphere and vCloud stack with the software-defined services around networking and security and storage that was announced last year at VMworld. And then the darker blue are the cloud management offerings that integrate this cloud infrastructure platform. So we'll cover what's new and upcoming with the vFabric Application Director piece specifically. So let's talk about cloud service provisioning. And again, I took out some of the VCAC specific slides since this was a vFabric Application Director roadmap presentation. So at a high level, the CSP, and as Pete alluded to earlier, is basically providing personalized self-service delivery of infrastructure, application, and desktop services. And by automating the end-to-end service lifecycle across heterogeneous and hybrid clouds, VMware CSP allows customers to enable business agility while increasing operational efficiency. And in delivering the capability for private and hybrid clouds, we focus on multi-platform, multi-provider environment to ensure that we offer the broadest set of infrastructure capabilities. And this is mainly done through VCAC's ability to support multiple infrastructure fabrics across physical, virtual, and cloud resources. And Application Director, of course, enables you to model and automate the delivery and lifecycle of an application using a model-based approach to delivering standardized application blueprints and components. And as far as integration goes between Application Director and VCAC, to address that question now, in the upcoming release of vFabric Application Director, which is the Apollo release, it's expected in May, and we'll actually GA with the VCAC Burma release, so it will both be 5.2 versions. So in that release, we did the first step of integration with VCAC, and we actually leverage VCAC as a cloud provider to provision applications on vSphere, and going forward, we're going to continue to leverage VCAC as the cloud abstraction layer, so that you can provision not only on vSphere-specific machine blueprints in VCAC, but any sort of all the infrastructure that VCAC currently supports as far as physical, virtual, and hybrid clouds, that going forward, the plan is to use that as the abstraction layer and be able to support that. So what's needed for an effective cloud service provisioning? The way we sort of structured this roadmap presentation is to bucket things into 4 main categories, and we try to basically describe the features that are being developed in both VCAC and Application Director in any of these buckets. So any infrastructure, you know, obviously I just talked about that. That's basically the ability to provision on all kinds of infrastructure, and that's what actually is so appealing about VCAC, is that because of its strengths in that area, and because of its support of all the different kinds of cloud infrastructures. The platform as a service and desktop as a service, essentially a lot of like new features will be provided in that area, and personalized delivery of application and desktop services on top of the infrastructure, which already exists as in VCAC. So VCAC is an infrastructure as a service as it exists today, and what we're hoping to do and work on is the platform as a service capabilities. Lifecycle management exists for both the infrastructure and the application side, and so it's not sufficient to just provision an application or a virtual machine. The end-to-end lifecycle management of the service we provide, spanning the lifecycle of the services from requesting and provisioning through the retirement and archival, including the 360-degree view of managing a service and monitoring and of performance KPIs. And then the last bucket is the extensibility. So this is to add into the service catalog that we're creating for both infrastructure and application services, and being able to integrate with existing services, either from a provisioning workflow like a CMDB, or from inside the application that's dependent on a service, so like modeling an external dependency on Active Directory running in the customer environment. So the combination of these 4 vectors or themes ensure that customers can deliver the personalized services they need for the users in their business on the most agile infrastructure. So here are some examples of what the cloud service provisioning will deliver in the next 2 years, I would say. So for any infrastructure bucket, that enhancements continue to be made on the VCAC side to provision on VMware private and public clouds and other hypervisors like KVM, for instance, physical and Amazon EC2. So some of the examples are KVM, you know, IBM X series and VCE blocks. On the platform as a service side, a personalized self-service portal will provide the application store-like experience for customers to request and provision their infrastructure, application, and desktop services using VCAC and Application Director. And then for lifecycle management, there'll be integrations with VCOps and ITFM.cloud, so that customers can get the 360-degree view of their services, as well as being able to perform application updates, rollback, and monitoring on the application side. And then on the extensibility side, the CSP provides the ability to easily deliver new services using the CSP Service Designer, and with VCO, customers can easily extend the product to integrate with existing IT service management tools as well. So I'll quickly talk about the any infrastructure. This is not specific to vFabric Application Director per se, but because going forward we will be using VCAC as the cloud abstraction layer, so that any sort of infrastructure that VCAC will support will hopefully be able to use that to provision applications using that cloud abstraction layer. So the commitment to any infrastructure is key for the success of cloud service provisioning, and we plan on enhancing the vCloud support, the VCD support, and as well as the Amazon AWS support, and add additional support for KVM, IBM X Series, and VCE vBlocks to enable self-service for end users regardless of infrastructure, and ensuring cradle-to-grave management of VMs regardless of the hypervisor. So this is essentially a more detailed slide showing the key enhancements that will be happening over the next 2 years. So enhancements around AWS pricing and additional AWS services, private OpenStack and public OpenStack cloud providers, being able to import, provision, reclaim, and retire VMs, and support for converged infrastructure, storage, and IBM Blade. And then on the networking side, that essentially with deeper networking and security integration, customers can get the ability to define policies as part of the infrastructure blueprint in VCAC. So specifically, the ability to attach a VM to a VXLAN network and add a VM to a load balancer pool, while also ensuring the proper security settings by placing the VM in the right security groups from VCNS that protect the VM with the right firewall rules. So the ability to pick and choose the security groups that a machine blueprint belongs to, as well as setting up the security or the firewall settings will all be as part of the VCAC plan. So as far as the platform as a service, that's where most of the sort of efforts are going. And a lot of the things may not happen as part of the 2013 plan, but definitely as part of the 2014 plan. So infrastructure exists primarily to service applications, and with CSP, one of our key goals is to make sure that IT can maintain the same governance and control on infrastructure services inside their environment as they do externally. So the first thing that we would like to do as part of the platform as a service vision is to deliver a PaaS self-service experience that will enable application director blueprints for both custom and packaged apps to be published into the service catalog. And essentially this will allow application deployment teams to easily deploy their applications in multiple infrastructures. And this capability, along with the infrastructure as a service blueprints or the machine blueprints that exist today in VCAC, will provide the full flexibility for end users to provision what they need, when they need it, and with the ability to customize the application. So some of this, the being able to publish an application a blueprint into the service catalog is expected in the Q4 release this year. As far as being able to sort of create a platform service with a VM plus middleware from within the same console, that may be done in 2014. But the publishing of blueprints should happen by end of this year. So as I said, we expect to enable Application Director as a full-fledged, roll your own PaaS offering in 2014. So that can support a fully heterogeneous infrastructure. So today, Application Director supports vCloud Director and AWS environments, as Hartman mentioned. So Application Director can provide an application blueprinting capability that is accessible to any infrastructure going forward using VCAC as a cloud abstraction layer. So in the first half of 2013, which is by the Apollo release expected next month, Application Director will begin by deploying natively on vSphere through VCAC. And then going forward, we're going to continue to support more machine blueprints in VCAC so that we support more infrastructure for deploying applications. And then lastly, for a true integrated experience, we expect to have blueprints from Application Director and VCAC converge so as to offer a single place to determine what and where to deploy an item. This will ensure consistent look and feel, as well as a single set of business policies that can be defined by one or more users pertaining to the application service or the infrastructure service. So this is a screenshot of what the service catalog will look like, and essentially the catalog will have basically all types of cloud services, whether they're infrastructure or applications, and the ability to model, publish, and consume platform services will be ongoing in 2014 and in 2013 as well. In vFabric Application Director, we are introducing some policy-based provisioning features. So within Application Director itself, so this is not related to the VCAC Application Director integration, but this is in AppD itself that we're introducing the ability to enforce policies across different deployment environments by whitelisting and blacklisting application services. So as an example, if you want to make sure that only Oracle database is used in production, or that a specific kind of service is blacklisted in a specific deployment environment, that you'll be able to do that with this capability. We also are introducing the ability to do policy-based provisioning by setting memory, CPU, and total number of VM limits across the nodes in a deployment. So you can define these policy rules, and you can say, for this deployment, I want to make sure that every node or every VM in the application, in the different application tiers, must have this amount of memory or this amount of CPU or this number of nodes. And of course, we're going to provide the ability to have customers create their own policy rules, but out of box that we're looking at essentially the whitelisting, blacklisting, and a few other examples like memory, CPU, and total number of VMs. And but customers can leverage a policy authoring tool from within AppD to create their own policies. And for each deployment, they can have a compliance view that will show the policy violations, against active and effective policies on deployments and application updates. And essentially, the platform as a service, will provide a personalized, simple, and extensible catalog. So the desired end state is to be able to browse a single catalog for any type of infrastructure, application, and desktop needed. And to be effective in that, the catalog needs to be personalized. So only services that are specific to that user, simple so that it's easy to navigate, and extensible so that if you want to add X as a service, you should be able to do that. And the framework in the CSP solution will help customers do that. So now on to lifecycle management, and I'll probably spend another 5 minutes on the next two sections. For lifecycle management, of course, there's a lot of things that VCAC is doing as far as managing the infrastructure and machine blueprints, and being able to reclaim inactive VMs and their integration with VCOps and ITBM. But for vFabric Application Director, that we're introducing the ability to roll back and reuse an update profile, and also a single console for monitoring deployed applications using Hyperic data. So Puppet integration is ongoing, and most probably any integration with Puppet will happen in 2014. And integration with Puppet actually exists today in the form of a Puppet service that's available in the marketplace or the solutions exchange. And the integration basically enables customers to deploy applications using Puppet manifests, leveraging the vast number of Puppet modules in the Puppet Forge. So many customers today use Puppet to keep workstations and servers in compliance. And in 2014, we will introduce the first out-of-box integration with Puppet that will facilitate the deployment of Puppet agents on any cloud service as users order these services from the catalog. And in future releases, we will provide change notifications, allowing users to track Puppet-initiated changes from the console, and basically making the CSP solution the entry point for making the actual Puppet changes. But all of that is like the future plan, and to be completely honest, the timeline should be 2014 for this one. As far as lifecycle management, that essentially we facilitate the release automation by enabling customers to manage application changes end-to-end. So code and configuration, scale-out changes can happen on a specific application blueprint. And what we're doing in this release is introducing the update profile, which basically saves frequently used updates on a specific application version in a deployment, and then you can reuse that update profile across different deployment environments, and that will essentially facilitate the ability to promote changes across different deployment environments. So the new application update features will include the rollback. So today we don't provide the ability to sort of roll back a failed update, and so we're introducing that in the Nitro release by end of this year. And the idea is that if a critical update fails, that you should be able to have a rollback script to bring back the application to the last successful state. And then the update profile reuse is what I described in the previous slide, which is the ability to save frequently used updates in scale-outs in code and config changes, and basically be able to promote them across different deployment environments. We're also introducing external services, which will be covered in the extensibility section. And so to be completely consistent, we're going to facilitate application updates on these external services. And then we're going to close the gap and try and provide updates support for applications deployed in Amazon EC2. We're also introducing the apps console. And so the apps console is a single console for monitoring deployed applications. And basically it makes sure that customers can successfully monitor that the application is achieving the availability and performance targets. And you can correlate performance issues with deployment lifecycle events and update lifecycle events. And the performance data is all being captured from Hyperic. So a customer who wants to use this feature will need to have Hyperic server installed somewhere. But the registering of monitoring solutions takes care of deploying the agent as part of the application deployment. And we leverage all of the Hyperic data to be able to basically monitor the deployed application. And you can also take corrective actions if you see a specific performance issue arise, whether it's a Hyperic type of corrective action like restarting an application server, or it could be at the VM level so that you can restart or reboot a VM. And lastly, extensibility. So that's being able to have an extensible framework and design to facilitate X as a service. And essentially, today we have the infrastructure as a service, and we're introducing the platform as a service. But as customers, typically have different needs and different components and things in their data center or in their cloud environments, that they may want to provide that as a service. So that's the extensibility part. So when it comes to the partner ecosystem and the service catalog, it's essentially to enable the full flexibility for our customers to fully customize their portals by adding brand new services. And this will not necessarily require developer skills or coding experience, but we'll make sure that this can be done by business analysts. And when it comes to Application Director, we're introducing this new feature called External Services. These can be registered and modeled in application blueprints, and we'll be increasing our support for these services in the Cloud Service Provisioning suite. And out-of-box services will be provided for provisioned database through the Data Director, existing databases, whether they exist in the cloud or in the data center, load balancers, and a universal connector for SaaS-like offerings like Salesforce or Workday. And these external services will continue to be built and made available through the marketplace, but the ones out of box will be shipped with the product itself. And at a high level, this is the high-level roadmap summary in each of these buckets. I'm not going to go over this, but you guys can review this when you get a chance. And that's it from my part.
Thank you, Amjad. So, yes, Brianna?
I was going to say, Pete, do you want to start the demo? And Hartman,
Yeah.
I know you've answered a lot of questions. If there's anything you like to review with everyone, or just hand it over to Pete.
Well, I think at this point I'd like to give Pete a chance to show everybody what App Director looks like and go through a little bit of the flow. We don't have a lot of time left, I don't think. So a lot of questions came in, so maybe we'll forego sort of a formal Q&A. For anybody who has other questions, just dump them into the Q&A session, and we'll follow up with you, or you can always reach out to Pete, myself, or Amjad offline. Pete, and just take the balance of the time, and let's walk through what we can.
Great. And if folks, if we can, we'll keep continuing on. Past the hour, folks can stay on. If you're able to stay on, please do. But we'll continue. So what I've done is I've logged in to the application director instance. Hopefully everybody can see the full screen. If not, let me know and I can try to resize it.
We can see it.
Great. So application director is really, the interface and the use cases really support four key users. So there is a cloud admin who is responsible for setting up, for example, vCloud Director or vSphere or whatever, for basically setting up and defining and organizing resources, organizations, memory, data, storage, et cetera, setting up that back-end environment and being responsible for making those environments available to users within Application Director. There's also an application architect who basically leverages services and components to construct application blueprints. I'll talk about blueprints in a little more detail in a moment. And then there is the cloud, the catalog administrator, who is really could be multiple people, but really they're the subject matter experts in the applications and the services. So they may have a deep understanding of Oracle. They may have a deep understanding of Apache or application servers for Java-based application servers or .NET or what have you, and construct services and make those available based on their organization's policies, et cetera, standard configurations, and construct a catalog of services and resources. And I'll show you that in a moment. And then there are the deployers. They could be a QA resource who needs to stand up an environment to be able to run his tests very quickly. Or it could be a developer who wants to stand up and do some development changes, stand up an environment, test out those development changes, and then of course production, right? Moving those applications to the cloud and making customers or users able to access them. So I'm just going to jump in to one of these blueprints really quickly, just to kind of show you the a given blueprint, and then we'll dive into the actual catalog to show you what some of these services look like underneath. So when I select the blueprint, this is the blueprint for the 2.1.0 version. When I log into this blueprint, if there are underlying changes to any of the templates, the VM templates, et cetera, that were brought in, the blueprint will recognize those and then incorporate and bring those changes into the blueprint for you. So if an underlying template is modified, it's updated it's applied to the blueprint. So App Director provides, when working with blueprints, a very simple drag-and-drop interface to be able to drag and construct and model an application. So a blueprint is really a logical topology for an application, whether it's a single-tier, single-server application, or in the case of this application, a three-tier application. It represents the operating systems and what we call logical templates. These templates are basically linked to those VM images that are sitting in your cloud. If it's a vCloud Director, the OVF files are the VMs that are sitting in there. If it's Amazon, they're linked to the AMIs for the machine images within Amazon Cloud. So what this basically says is I want to bring in those images of these VMs could be have a fully a pre-installed application like MySQL on it, and I can easily take that and drag that into my blueprint, right? And so I've now added to this application architecture a 32-bit CentOS Linux box with a pre-installed MySQL server on it. I can then manage and adjust and set properties, right? I'm going to delete this one. I just wanted to be able to show you how easy it is to basically pick and choose and drag these things in. I could have started a new blueprint from scratch and constructed this three-tier from the beginning, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to walk through this existing blueprint. So when I look at these different systems, right, I've set up my machine. I've set up Apache, for example, as a service from this left side, these services, right? So I've got my web servers at the bottom. So I've added that Apache. So if I look, this is Apache 2.0. I've got its properties that I can manage or I can modify and update. For example, I can set or change any given property, like the port that I want to use. I can use a catalog value. I can bind that property to another blueprint. Now, I'll show you an example of that in a moment. So I look at a service like my app server for my Java application. So this is a service which is a JBoss server. This basically provides all of the information about where to go to get the download, what are the configuration parameters. I can also look at my EAR file, and this provides the specific locations or URLs to deploy. I'm just going to bring this up so you can see it a little better. So what each one of these different services or service components or application components is it's a representation of that application or service. And all of the parameters that were defined by the catalog admin to basically that need to be either configured or they could be set so that they can't be overridden. These values must always be this value to maintain consistency in the environment so that the when operations takes it on, they know what to expect. Or when you need to troubleshoot or look at this, you know how these applications were deployed. So that's where that standardization comes into play, is I can standardize how these applications are actually deployed and how they're configured in the environment. One of the things I'll show you quickly here before I go into the actual catalog and show you some of the details between the services is I can see within this topology a couple of things. One, I've set up dependencies. So what these dependencies are saying is that the database has to be installed and configured so that I get its DB name and instance name, so that when I configure and set up this Java application, I can see down here I need to provide certain parameters to the configuration of that Java application. And so this is basically, because I've created that dependency, I can now pull in attributes that once it's actually deployed and instantiated, I can bring those values into my application. And this happens automatically. You can see it's basically bound to the value, database MySQL DB port. So I don't have to manually, when I deploy this app, go in and configure it and look at a piece of paper that tells me how the database was configured. This automates that whole process, allowing you to configure it, pull in values, and then do the installation, configuration, and setup automatically. Same thing over here, the Apache load balancer. When it gets configured within its properties, one of those properties is the ability to basically say, what are the IPs, right? Where do I get the IPs for the load balancer, okay? So once that app server is configured and set up, those IPs will be fed to the load balancer so that it can redirect the appropriate transaction requests. Now, one of the other reasons why this is important to bind that rather than make it a static value is that this particular app server was defined to be a cluster. And when I go out and deploy this application, I might decide that this particular deployment needs to have one server in the cluster or maybe two. This also comes into play in the case of scale out, where a certain number of transactions are hit. I need to expand or scale out that application. I have the ability to do that through the deployment window, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But ultimately, those two properties for those two app servers would be then automatically fed into the load balancer. So that's what those relationships allow you to do when you're deploying these applications. Okay. So when I look at some of these services, just to kind of give you a detail, kind of a view. So I'll bring up the Apache service. And so when this service was constructed, when the catalog administrator or subject matter expertise set this up, I can have multiple versions of this service. I could have a 2.2 or 3.0. Maybe the configuration settings are a little bit different depending on the version of Apache server, and that could also depend on the application that somebody's building, what type of version. So I have the ability to create multiple versions. I can also copy and make some tweaks and adjustments to it. I could make this and turn it into a version 2.2.1 that's specifically for use by QA, different from production, for example. So within that service, I have a number of things here. So I have tags. So tags, basically you can define tags. There are predefined tags within the system already. So I can associate a tag with a service so that it organizes that view within that blueprint view that I showed you. So there were databases, application server tags, et cetera. So you can associate a tag with any service that you create so that it will automatically show up in the right bucket or right folder within that blueprint screen. Supported components. This service supports script as a component, so I would be able in that blueprint view to drag a script application component over and then add in my script that, add in my unique script that I wanted to use at that point in time, whatever that use case might be. And then what OSs can I actually add this service to? So if I have created or dragged in a Windows template and try to drag this Apache 2.2 on top of it, since it's a Unix-based application, for Unix, it would have flagged and said you cannot put this this version on this OS. So it would flag you and kind of protect you from yourself from doing those types of things, or trying to force a deployment of a Windows service on a Linux box, as an example. So here are all of the properties that are currently defined and been set by that catalog administrator for this type of service. He's got default configurations for default ports. If from a security perspective you wanted to set or lock down certain configuration parameters for any web service that goes out, you have the ability to do those types of things here and set those parameters. So it could be required. It could be secure, obscure the value for security. So if it's a password, it provides that hash so you can't view the blueprint and see what the actual passwords are. And then override is a check that says, can I override this setting at deployment? So if I'm a user that's rolling out a web-based server and I want to change that to 8080 instead of 8081, I'd have the ability to do that. If it was locked down and said no, then I wouldn't be able to change it. I can also include all of the scripts for this service, which are installation, configure, start, and update, so it really allows you to incorporate the lifecycle scripts for managing that application when you go to deployment. And this is kind of that view of that particular script. So in constructing it, you can really bring in all of the in-house subject matter expertise, best practices, that knowledge base, and incorporate that into software and allow people to use that in a nice graphical way.
Pete, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. We are at the top of the hour, but we'll keep going to finish the demo and continue to capture the questions and keep the recording going. So if you want to see the end of the demo, we'll have the recording posted in a couple of hours along with the decks. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Brianne. So one of the other key things that I wanted to talk to before I kind of look at the cloud provider environment and then actually look at a running deployment for you is tasks. So tasks are really things that you can add or build out that you can incorporate into the process during deployment. So some of these you can see might be specific or required for a certain service to be installed. You could have embedded some of that capability into it, but I might want to have a checksum, right? Once you've configured the web server and started it up, run a quick web URL, pull in the IP address, and verify that the web server is actually up and running and functioning before you move on to the next step. As an example, you can see some of these join the domain. So you may need to, in a particular deployment, you may want to make sure that that Windows server is in the domain before you continue with the rest of the installation, because maybe the repositories that it needs are in a domain server where you have to map a drive. So ultimately, these tasks are custom tasks that you can define. There are some out of the box tasks that can be updated, but you can create a new task from scratch. Some of the interesting things that folks have done up on the Solutions Exchange marketplace is they've created either services for things. Some of our partners and even some VMware employees have created services or created tasks or created blueprints that encompass services and tasks, et cetera, and have made those available up on the Solutions Marketplace for users to download or to import directly into their application directory from Solutions Exchange. So similar to a service, what OSs are supported with this particular task? What are the properties or environment variables associated with it that may be necessary to execute the script? that actually will run when this tests. So I'll show you a deployment in a moment. So as Amjad mentioned in the roadmap, there are a number of, in the roadmap, additional cloud architectures that will be supported over time. Today, in version 5.0, Application Director supports vCloud. It also supports Amazon EC2. So when I look at a cloud provider, what I provide is, what version, what type of cloud provider is it, the host name, the organization name, and this is the vCloud Director environment, so I can organize and set up organizations, and I can map different cloud provider environments to different organizations within VCD. Provide that organization administrator. This administrator has to be an org administrator. It cannot be the overall admin user for VCD. It needs to be the admin user for that organization and its password. And what we see down here are all of the templates associated with this particular cloud provider. These templates are, again, those VM images that are sitting up in the cloud, those vApp templates that are there ready to be used. So when you go to do a deployment and you're calling on a Linux OS, it'll basically map, in those logical templates, map to these templates. So it'll say, I need this VM spun up in support of this application deployment. So again, I can click on any one of these and see the details associated with that template. Is it a gold master? What type of OS is it? What's its location URI within VCD? Now, when setting up an Amazon, I don't have an Amazon account at the moment, but what you'll see is that the values, this is kind of the properties for a VCD environment. If I set up Amazon EC2, there's other information that I need. So I need to understand the Amazon region, its proxy URL, the username, and the password for that Amazon EC2 account for that appropriate region. Templates, when I bring these templates in, those templates will talk to Amazon and bring up that catalog of AMI images that are set up within that Amazon region. And then I can then add them to this cloud provider and then make those accessible to then map within my logical templates. So I can then say within a logical template for CentOS, for example, what are the different cloud providers and what are the cloud templates associated with that. So when I construct a blueprint for an application and call on a CentOS 5.6 32-bit system, this is the cloud template or the VM template that's going to be instantiated in support of the deployment of that application. So I look at a running deployment. I can see when I open this up, I can see basically 4 key areas of information. One, obviously the details, when the deployment was kicked off, when it was complete, what's the name, all of the different details associated with it. I can also quickly view what OSs or what VMs were spun up, what's their specific IP addresses that were assigned, app server IDs, etc. From here, if I want to, I can click on this and actually open up a console interface to that actual machine right from Application Director. For this step in the task, I also can see the blueprint. So this was the actual blueprint that was leveraged and used and the properties that were configured for this particular deployment. So if I wanted to go in and review what was exactly set up and configured within this application, I can do that very simply. And then this execution plan. Now the execution plan was set up and configured based on that blueprint. As I mentioned before when I showed the blueprint, the dependencies associated. So this execution plan shows what order and what is actually going to happen as this application gets deployed automatically. So I can see at the start, once those VMs are kicked off, I've got my application, my SQL database, my app server, my load balancer. So there are certain steps that may happen in parallel. I may start actually installing the MySQL and the JBoss server at the same time. But when it comes to this particular step in the application, this step will sit in a waiting state until the initialized DB script and that database is actually up and running. Once that's configured and set up, as I mentioned before, those properties or those values for DB instance name, the IP address, the port, et cetera, will be fed into the configuration of this step within the process. And then, of course, this step will sit in a waiting state because I don't want to start my load balancer installation until I've got my application server or application servers installed. And then once that's done, that process will kick off. And once all settings are green and all of the applications and components are successfully deployed, you'll get the deployment success at the end. For each one of these steps, I can view the action script that was executed to do this configuration. I can view any of the properties. I can also view the machine log that basically is the output for all of the steps that were executed. So if there was actually a problem at any point or a failure, I could actually go in here and review to try to diagnose what happened with that deployment. If a step fails within the blueprint, the deployment stops. So the deployment stops, does not continue. We'll say deployment failed. You can either tear that down. Those VMs will still be there. They're still consuming resources within the cloud. So if it's failed, you want to be able to find out why it failed, make adjustments and fix it, and then tear down this particular deployment to reclaim those assets or those VMs that were installed, and then redeploy once you've fixed the issues. From a running or an active deployment, I have a couple of choices. I can do a scale out. So as I mentioned before, in this particular blueprint, that app server was a cluster. So if I selected scale out, I could easily give it a new name, click OK. It'll then pull up the option to basically modify this value. So I can say 1, I can say 2. This scale-out capability this can be done manually. And there's also some use cases and integrations with VCOps and VCO that kind of would automate that. So when I saw a particular trigger in VCOps for the performance or transaction hits, for example, that might set a trigger to go execute a scale-out on this particular application deployment and set a value, right, the predefined value. Once I kick this off, it will actually go out and install and rebuild a new app execution plan. I'll show you that here. So as you can see, the execution plan for this next step in the deployment is going to be the deployment of the second application server. And again, that dependency still holds true, that once this is done, it will then go and actually just run the update script on the load balancer to add that IP address in for that new app server into that load balancer so that it can now start to distribute the transactions and the queries across the two application servers. Okay. At this point, I'm just going to cancel this in the interest of time rather than kick this off. Now, the other option that I have is to change the configuration. So I could change. So, say for example, since this is a JBoss or a Java application, maybe the developers have created a new version of the EAR file. So once I select this, basically any of the parameters that are available within that particular blueprint that can be modified. So when I looked at original deployment, it would come up and say MySQL, JBoss server, Apache load balancer, the application components, the initialize script, or the bank app. So here I've got an EAR file location. Now I could change this. Say they gave me a version 3. I could change it to that location for that new EAR file. Make that setting, click go, and then App Director will create that execution plan to go out and execute and basically reinstall a new, shut those app servers down, install, basically reconfigure to point to that new AR file, start those services back up, and then and now that app server will be running on the new version. Again, in the interest of time, I just wanted to show you that that process. I could say, say it was just as simple as doing a 3, right? It's in the same repository. Again, all of these services and all of these components are pointers to, or references to locations for files or values for the settings that should be used at deployment time. Okay. And I'm just going to look at one more deployment. I believe there was a deployment that had some of the tasks, so you kind of see that type of an environment. So you can see in this particular deployment path, the user that constructed this, or actually did this deployment, set up a number of tasks. So he added these tasks to the deployment plan. So basically, in this case, for the app servers, he's adding, the user was adding management. So he had scripts to add Hyperic agents so that you could deploy these applications with monitoring already built in, rather than set them up and go out and then have to manually install agents after the fact. You could do that right at the actual application deployment time. And you can see, join the domain, get the agent, do the config management remote install, and then follow through with the rest of the application components. Do the same thing and then restart the service after you've done configuring it. So he's basically customized that blueprint with additional tasks that were built that we could see within the catalog. So he was able to not have to build these by scratch right here at deployment time. He was able, when he did this deployment, to pull from that catalog that was already set up with these particular tasks. So he doesn't have to know all of the gory details about how to do the agent. One was already created for them. So he said, okay, this needed an agent, pulled it from the catalog, popped it into the execution plan at the appropriate time, and then hit the go button, and then application director will then automate that process of doing those applications. Okay. That's pretty much what I have for the demo today. If there's anybody still on, if there are any questions that you may have, or anything that you might still want me to show you within the product, feel free to speak up.
Thanks, Pete. I haven't seen any new questions come in.
There are a couple at the bottom. Sorry. So Chris was asking if you updated one existing component of the deployment, Pete. So I think the answer to that is yes. That you just updated the EAR file.
Yeah, exactly. I could go in and when I choose that configure option, it basically provides me a view of all of the things that are overridable. So when I showed those categories or those properties in the catalog, right, they had the flags. If they were selected to be overridable, which means when I've done that deployment, those are now available to me when I go to execute that config. So I could just make one simple change. Maybe I want to just change the web server port from 8080 to 8181. Whatever, or like I had done with the code, it could be a config change, or it could just be a code update, right? Point this app server to this new version of the EAR file, and that would be the only change that executed for that running deployment.
And then Henrik was asking if this blueprint that we're looking at is available, the ESM shopping cart, and this is a slightly modified version, as far as I know, Henrik, of what comes with the out-of-the-box content with App Director. So pretty much everything you're seeing here ships with it out of the box. There are a couple of things that have been set up in this demo environment to highlight some things, but for the most part, everything that you see here is available in the out-of-the-box appliance.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So this particular blueprint that I showed earlier was basically a renamed version of the clustered Dukes Bank application. This particular one right here is a rename of the dot shopping cart the shopping cart application. So that's one of the beauties of the tool, is that I can take an existing application that's already in here, and then I can actually work and modify. I can copy it and actually make changes and modify it and leverage some of the built-in expertise and maybe make adjustments and settings without affecting the existing catalog. Okay, so I have that ability to do that as well. You'll see a couple of them in here. Somebody started from scratch, created a new one right out of the gate. I think the clustered Duke's Bank application is provided by default. The .shopping cart app is a blueprint that's in the system. The clustered .net shopping cart, the Zimbra app, NanoTrader. So these are all kind of default applications that are shipped with the product. So somebody who installs it and brings it up will have some predefined blueprints and applications already in the system that they can use to kind of familiarize themselves with the workflow.
Great. Mike asked, what are the underlying system requirements to deploy a large app like the one showed?
So we'll look at we'll look back at this and kind of show that blueprint, Mike. So what you define at the time when you build out this blueprint is for that particular application, the application architect or the middleware admin will know what type of, will have an understanding of the type of VM resources that they need. So depending on the templates that you've brought in, so for this particular system, right, it's a 1 CPU 512. Now this is something that I could, potentially based on the template, actually bump up, right, and say, okay, I need 2 CPUs, right? So you have the ability within the blueprint to adjust the resources. It could require more memory, right? I have to make sure that I have a VM template that matches those requirements, or is capable of being bumped up to those resource requirements. So you can kind of deploy or set those up at, so I can see this particular CentOS box has more memory associated with it than the box that has the load balancer on it. So you really kind of define within the blueprint. I can make those adjustments to these settings during the actual deployment process. So when I come to that execution plan, so if I went to say, let's do a quick deploy of this application, based on this template, so I'm just going to select from the existing deployment profile that I've already set up. So what it will do is it'll bring up, again, that process, right? So I can view, I can look at which cloud environment. Maybe I have multiple cloud environments and I want to deploy this on a different one. The cloud templates that are associated with the OSs that I've asked for, these are the types of VMs that will be brought up. I can click Next and look at the properties, and I can see for the node, so I have the node setting. So here is where I can make adjustments to that. So if I know when I'm rolling out this application, you know what, we actually need this to be higher, so I can make those changes and assign that as a property to the VM when I go out and spin those things up. So you can see for each one of the different nodes within that environment. And when I look at the app server, again, it was a cluster, so by default the value is 1. So whenever this is like quick deployed, it'll deploy it with 1 app server in the cluster. I could push this out with 2 or 3 right out of the gate if I wanted to. Okay. Again, services, components, I can make adjustments to any of these settings at deployment time as long as those values were flagged to be overridden. I could have locked everything down completely within that blueprint and made all of these values, not settable, right? This is the only way that application can be deployed, whether you like it or not, as an example. And that really kind of comes into enforcing the standards and the policies that you've set. So those are really things that are up to the catalog, the catalog administrator and the application architect when they construct that blueprint for the application that they make available to the users to deploy. Any other questions?
Yes, Hartman, you just answered one. Do you want to cover that, or should we go to, do we have a list of limitations for updating existing components?
Pete, why don't you take that one, and then we can come back to Chris's last question.
Yeah, so in version 5.0 for update, so there are there's a couple of ways to answer the question. So there are different licenses. There's a provisioning license for Application Director, and then a release automation license for Application Director. The provisioning only license basically is new deployment on vCloud environments only. If you want to be able to do config updates, scale out, or deploy to multiple cloud environments like private and public, like vCloud and Amazon, you need the release automation license. Now, in version 5.0 with release automation, I can do scale out. I can do updates for any of the Linux-based deployed applications. Not able to do that on Windows in the 5.0, and only able to do updates in a vCloud environment, not in an EC2 environment. The next version, 5.2, as Amjad had talked to, I will be able to do Windows Update in VCD, Windows Update in Amazon, as well as when we support the vSphere, deployment in vSphere through VCAC will support the update capability as well, as long as you have the release automation license for Application Director. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, I think that's great. Oh, thanks, Chris.
And then for Chris's last question on the VCD catalog, being able to save a blueprint on the VCD catalog without deploying. I think the point here is that I was trying to make in the answer is that the blueprints are all saved in App Director, and that's all versions of an application in the different blueprints are saved there, so that you can take any of those versions and deploy it to any one of a variety of cloud environments. So you had one version that is in-house in production, that's fine, and you could take another version and put it in, let's say, QA test or some sort of development work at a public cloud or whatever. But the blueprints are saved locally in App Director so that you can then assign them or deploy them out to whichever of the cloud providers that you want to. So I don't see any other questions. Brianna, I want to take a second to thank Pete. Pete, I think you did a great job just grabbing someone else's environment and walking through it, because I know we had some issues getting our demo pod squared away, given some things going on with licensing. So, Pete, thanks for doing that. I really appreciate you making it work.
Oh, my pleasure. Hopefully this was informative for everyone, and I think Hartman had provided our contact information earlier on. So if you have any questions, follow-up questions, or want to reach out, feel free. We're here to help you guys out in the field and answer any questions. And if we don't know the answer offhand, well, we know where to go to get it. So I look forward to hearing from you guys.
Great, thank you, and thank you both so much for the extra time and making sure we got through all of the questions and the entire demo. And thanks everyone for joining today, and thanks for hanging on for a little bit longer. A quick reminder, I'll post the recording and both the decks in the next couple of hours on Field Academy. And with that, it will conclude today's session. So thank you again, Pete and Hartman, and have a great day, everyone. We'll be back next week.
Great. Thank you, Brianna.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.